All right. Hello again, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jackie Hooper, and I'm head of regional marketing here at SafeBreach. Thank you all so much for taking the time to attend our webinar today. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that it is being recorded and will be shared out to all registrants and attendees after it's completed. It will also be uploaded and shared to our YouTube channel and website. If at any point you have any questions about the content, please share them with us via the Q&A function. With that being said, we can go ahead and get started. On today's webinar, we'll be dispelling common misconceptions about healthcare cybersecurity and why healthcare organizations don't need best-in-class cybersecurity or class security tools to protect themselves. Our speaker today is SafeBreach's Chief Information Security Officer, Avi Avivi. Avi joined SafeBreach in 2021 with almost 30 years experience as a senior information security leader with multiple companies, including Wells Fargo, E-Trade, and Experian. All right, Avi, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to share my screen now. Also, if you want to link in with me, that QR code will get you to my LinkedIn link, and you can then just reach out and connect. So let me just also make a slight adjustment. It's not that healthcare doesn't need best-in-class security. What we're trying to say is you don't need the best-in-class security tool versus best-in-class or best-in-suite security tool. And I'll be making a case for that. So with that said, the healthcare industry has not a very unique economic reality. I think it's shared across different industries. Cybersecurity budgets are always tight. If you don't have a tight budget, let me know, because I might want to come and work at your company. The reality of it is we're always looked at as obviously as a cost center. And we just don't get as much as we would love to have or really say we need to have. Most organizations in our experience have seen either a freeze on their security budget or actually a reduction. And that makes it difficult. There's also multiple global macroeconomic challenges that obviously are making this situation even worse. And then budgets are just looked at a lot closer than they used to. Then, of course, healthcare is somewhat unique in that it's one of the top two industries that are constantly under attack. The number one being financial. And there's really, very simple reasons for that. Financial, it's because they have money. Whereas healthcare, you can't afford to fall victim to ransomware, right? There's lives at stake. It's not just about, yes, we're not going to make sales or something like that. We're not going to be able to offer treatment to people. And so that makes healthcare organizations a lot more likely to pay ransomware and be susceptible to breaches. And so, in cybersecurity, we always have a question: do we have a gap? We always feel like we're missing something, but it's not enough. I mean, can we actually prove that we have a gap? CISOs and in general, security professionals have what I call GAS, and it's a term I borrow from the photography world. And GAS stands for Gear Acquisition Syndrome, right? We always see the next shiny security tool. It's going to solve the world hunger and all of my security problems, and it has an attachment to a coffee machine, right? So it's nice, new, and let's buy it. It's got Gartner Cool Vendor, RSA innovation or something, and we want to buy it because it's a shiny new tool. And what that does is it actually creates a tool sprawl. Now, there's different studies out there that show that most enterprises have between, say, 50 and 150 security tools, and that's discrete security tools, and that's obviously a problem. If you think about it, just managing all those different tools can be an issue. Now, we have customers with actually over 250 security tools, cybersecurity tools. And that's a result really of, organic growth, we call it, right? I mean, you start with your core environment, and then there's some sort of a merger and acquisition, then another and another, and every company brings with it yet another set of tools. And sometimes the security team and or the IT group doesn't have a chance to even catch up and merge all of those together. Now, this is a slide I just picked out of the internet. You can find many versions of this. And this is the Cybersecuryscape. All these logos are cybersecurity vendors in different categories. So you have the network and infrastructure, web security, data security, MSSP, and it's an eye chart, right? And what we're saying is, well, some of these vendors actually do offer more than one solution. So if I try to eliminate vendors that only show, or logos that only show up once, it starts to get better. Still very busy, still an eye chart. And now what I want to do is even go one level further and say, well, let's see what vendors can give me the most number of tools. So all of a sudden, you're looking at just a handful of vendors that can offer you cybersecurity that do more than one specific function. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Avi. Is there a vendor you recommend as best in suite?
So that's a good question. We haven't gone to the suite quite yet, but I want to be very careful because we are a vendor ourselves. Not in we don't offer a prevention or detection. We just offer you a way of validating your security controls. And we're very vendor agnostic. So I don't want to endorse any one specific vendor. It really comes down to what is the stack that you're already using, right? I mean, you already have firewalls. I assume, I hope no one on this call doesn't have a firewall vendor, or no one on this call doesn't have an endpoint security vendor. So it's just an opportunity to look at what you already have and work with it. So that's basically it. And there are vendors that are somewhat more focused on security. And I should also note about this slide is that it's not the most up to date, because I know that, for example, Microsoft has offering in the IoT, in the threat intelligence, in the risk and compliance field, but this particular vendor that created this chart didn't include them for whatever reason. So there are other, Microsoft does show up in other vendors, and for that matter, I think that for the most part, if you already have a Microsoft stack, I really recommend that you look at the rest of their security tools. We have several customers, in fact, that have started consolidating from having separate standalone tools over to the Microsoft stack, again, because it's a best in suite and not just a best in class. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more we got for you. Our firewall vendor is Fortinet. Should we switch from one suite to another? For example, Cisco or Palo Alto Networks?
Good. That's another good question. So it's also a loaded question, right? So I'll give you an example. At SafeReach, when I came in, discovered we have Fortinet firewalls. I personally prefer Palo Alto. I've worked with them a lot longer. As you can see, they both have multiple offerings. You don't have to switch for the just for switching sake, right? So if your security stack is giving you what you need today, I would say, you need to also evaluate the cost, the operational cost of switching over to a new vendor. So most organizations have hardware and software refresh cycles. So I would say, at your next refresh cycle, reevaluate, see if it's worth making that investment. But generically, I would say don't switch if you already have a suite. It just, when you have a gap, if you have a gap, just add another tool, or look at the tools you already have and see if they have in their suite a tool that can address that gap. Any more questions?
Great. Nope. I think we're good right now.
Okay. This is a quote I love giving, and that is a quote by Andre Maginot, the person who really came up with the Maginal Line. Now, it's kind of a weird example, because Maginal Line is usually used as an example of a really bad defense or a failed defensive line. And for those of you who are not big on history or World War II, the Maginot Line was actually a state-of-the-art defensive line that the French put up on their border with Germany to try and prevent the Germans from invading France. Now, the problem is, as Maginot states here, and this is 3 years before the invasion, is that it was very expensive, and they weren't able to really deploy it all across the border. So what they said is, okay, well, it's not likely that the Germans are going to try and attack us from the north, because it's a very hilly and wooded area, so infantry and mechanized weapons are not going to go through there. And so they said, we're going to take advantage of that terrain and assume they're not going to attack us from there. And unfortunately, that was a bad assumption. And that's why the Maginot Line is often used as an example of how not to defend. Because what happened in practice is the Germans actually did test the defenses of the Maginot Line, realized that there's no chance they'll be able to breach them, and then went from the north. The reason I like this quote is because if you think about your security portfolio, it's very likely that you're defending or you're investing most of your cybersecurity budget on the most obvious route, right? Which is typically the internet, right? And you're typically protecting your most sensitive environments that are your internet-facing assets, your applications and databases. The problem is that the malicious actors, the adversaries, are not going to just try and attack that. Like the Germans, and again, I'm not putting down the Germans, back then, the malicious actors will probe and see if there's any other way to come into your environment. And with healthcare, as we all know, we're talking about a massive supply chain. We're talking about multiple vendors that interact, different APIs, et cetera. There's many, many ways of getting into your environment. And so the problem is you can't just defend and have what we call a very strong perimeter on your just your sensitive environment. You really need to consider about having your defenses deployed throughout. Now, when you think about that, and the reason I bring this up is best-in-class solutions are usually fairly expensive. Not to say that best in suite are not, they're just typically an order of magnitude more sensible in terms of the cost, because typically when you bundle different features or different products into one contract, you do get some economic leverage. So, I've been talking about best in suite and best in class, and I want to kind of go back to that concept and put a fine line on it. So you may recognize this guy, Elton Brown, if you watch the Food Network like I do. Elton Brown is one of the regular hosts there, and he came up with his unitasker versus multitasker philosophy. And just to say, he doesn't like unitaskers. And what does that mean? So obviously this is kitchen related. So he doesn't like gadgets that only perform one task or are only designed to perform one task in the kitchen. He likes to have something that can perform multiple tasks. So, this is an example of a unitasker. This is a hunting knife you can find on Amazon for $400. People will argue this is a best in class. Now, I full disclosure, I don't hunt. I don't know what a $400 knife can give me that is worth $400, but these do exist out there. I guess it's the very good looking handle. Maybe the blade doesn't need sharpening. No idea, but it is a unitasker. It's really meant to just hunt. It won't be useful to maybe, let's say, peel an apple or I don't know. I mean, you can technically use it for that, but probably not the best tool. Now, compare that to a multitasker, your good old Swiss Army knife. Not only does it have a blade, it also has a corkscrew opener, it has a bottle opener, it has a screwdriver, it can probably also julienne fries. Really, if I'm sitting down to a nice picnic with some wine and cheese, I'll probably use the Swiss Army knife over that big hunting knife. Yeah, I can probably open the bottle of wine with it, probably not very neatly, and I can cut some nice cheese and have a lovely picnic. But really, I can use this $20 knife, Swiss Army knife I can also get on Amazon, does everything I need it to. Now, yes, if I go up against a bear, probably prefer to go with the hunting knife. Reality of it, I rarely am in the same vicinity of an actual bear. So this is going back to think of best in class as your unitasker and best in suite as your multitasker. I'll pause for questions if there are any.
All good right now.
Okay. So basically, when we consider our environment, we want to build the business case, right? And we do that using testing. The one thing you want to make sure when you switch or when you consolidate tools is that you don't lose coverage. And again, as I said, the healthcare environment, particularly in our experience, is typically very complex. So, if you just rely on your typical penetration test, again, you will have someone coming in from the internet and trying to attack maybe your external APIs, your production web, production database, or if you have a public cloud instance, which some health organizations do. That's your typical penetration test. But really, if you start considering another infiltration point, let's say you have an extranet for your partners or your vendors, they might be able to attack your environment differently because, again, you're not necessarily, your marginal line is over on the internet side, whereas, the terrain you're dependent on, you're saying, I trust my partners, so I'm going to not really look at the extranet as an infiltration point. Then you start adding lateral movement. So what happens if they do manage to get into one of these networks? What you'll see is technically they can start trying to spread laterally. And then, people seem to discount insider threat. It used to be, there used to be a saying that, in the world of cybersecurity incidents, 80% are insider threat oriented versus 20% coming from the outside. Now, obviously, there's been a shift over the past, I would say, decade, but really, the reality of it is insider threat, you're talking about both the malicious and non-intentional. So it could be that a user just didn't know any better and they, downloaded something. And as a result, you now have some malicious software that lives on your corporate network and is also trying to do lateral movement and, last but not least, exfiltrate data. So really it becomes kind of an infactorial issue, right? If you really want to cover your environment, you need to make sure that you don't have a marginal line just around your internet. You need to think about your security across your entire environment, and you need to be able to validate it, right? So if you're consolidating your tools into a suite, you also want to verify and validate that you haven't lost coverage. And that's something that obviously SafeReach can assist with. This is not meant to be a sales pitch. It is just talking about the concept of switching from best in class to best in suite. So going back to it, this is my dream car. It's a Lamborghini. Arguably, it's a best in class in its category. There's obviously some Ferrari fans, some other car brand fans. I'm not going to try and alienate anyone here, but this is my personal preference. That, it's a great car. I love it. It looks great, gets really, really fast, but frankly, not very practical. Gas mileage on it is not awesome. And with today's gas prices, even though they've been coming down, still pretty expensive. And frankly, it's a very low car. And I live in rural Georgia, and our roads just are not that great for it. So I'd be scraping the bottom of that car quite a lot if I tried to drive around here. And let's face it, even though people here, especially on 75 and 85, can go up to 120 miles an hour, still not a big deal for this car. Most of the roads I drive on, you don't get above 35 or 45, or with a ton of traffic over 5 miles an hour. So not very practical car for where I'm at. That said, this is my car. Now, granted, it's not bottom of the rung. It's a hybrid Volvo, so it's a good car. Takes me anywhere I need. Because it's a hybrid, it also saves me a lot on gas. Much higher, much more comfortable, much more suited for the Georgia rural roads. So arguably, this is a best in suite car. Plenty of room for groceries. Have plenty of seating for my family. Just more practical. So yes, while I would love to have this car, I really can't afford it. Not the maintenance, not the actual car, and it's not practical. I'm just going to stick with this car. So bringing it all together, I just want to come away with really 3 main takeaways. Before you look for new technology, verify you have a gap. Don't be tempted to fall into gear acquisition syndrome. You don't always need the latest and greatest technology. Maybe your current technology can already do that just by adding a license or a feature to the existing portfolio. That leads to the second point, that sometimes best in suite will be better in the long run than a best in class. Also consider the fact that when you have one vendor that provides you the different security products, they are likely to interact with each other, meaning they can actually create a security mesh rather than individual point products that may or may not integrate with other products. which gets very, very important when you're dealing with complex and advanced threats. And then last thing is, don't sacrifice coverage for a price. And that goes both ways. If you consolidate or you decide to do away with point products and get a best in suite, make sure you validate those controls. Because the worst thing that can happen is that by trying to save on cost, you create a vulnerability or expose a vulnerability to the outside. And with that, I wanted to leave a little bit more time for questions and answers, but we have about 2 minutes. If there's more, then I obviously can stick around. But Jackie, any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Avi, for that. Just a reminder, if you guys do have any additional questions, please submit them through the Q&A or the webinar chat. We do have one for you. Is there a risk of vendor lock-in, or are we putting all of our security eggs in one basket?
That's a great question. So it's actually considered best practice to have what is called vendor diversity. The reality, though, in our environment where big companies are constantly consolidating and acquiring more and more technology, it's very likely that today's standalone solution will be bought up by one of those giants that you saw in that landscape slide, right? So IBM or Cisco or Checkpoint or Palo Alto Networks or Microsoft, they've done it in the past. They'll keep doing it. And there's so many vendors out there that have been doing that. So the reality of it is you almost have no choice other than doing that. Now, the reality of it in terms of actual attack coverage or content, they're very similar to one another. So I would say you're not risking, if you're going with a well-established vendor that is very big, reality of it is you're not, the risk of that vendor going under is somewhat minimal. If it is a very critical risk from your organization's point of view, and you require vendor diversity, then yes, you might want to choose another big vendor. But that said, and there's nothing to say that Google and Microsoft stacks can't live next to each other, or Palo Alto Network firewalls with Cisco switches, et cetera, et cetera. That can always happen. It's just that sometimes you can't afford vendor diversity, and you really are not incurring a whole lot of risk with going with one of these big vendors.
Great, thanks, Avi.
Any other questions?
Doesn't look like we've had any other additional ones come through.
Okay. If you have any more questions, do feel free to again reach out and follow up with either Jackie or myself. Again, I'm available on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Avi, for that great presentation. And thank you all again for taking the time to attend our webinar. The recording will be available momentarily on our website, and also all attendees and participants will be sent an email containing a direct link. Thanks so much, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.